Again, congratulations, ladies. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ross for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of our trustee board, our community. It's an honor to represent such amazing educators, those who serve as public servants for our children. So we had a great opportunity to recognize all of our representatives from our different schools and programs, as well as the finalists, the 3 finalists for Support Employee of the Year and Teacher of the Year. And so proud to have Ms. Brooke Bridges and Cammie Roop represent our district as Teacher of the Year and District Support Employee of the Year. Also on the same night, we gave recognition and honor to our retirees. This photo captures all of those who were in attendance that night, but when we tally up all of the years, and as they walked across the stage, we held their numbers of years of service and education from I think as low as 7 years to 46 years of service and education. When you tally up, School District 5 will lose 1,868 years of educational experience this year. And so it's our goal to try to replace and continue the legacy, but it's just an overwhelming representation of just the skill that's been brought by our teachers and our staff, and so we're very thankful for them in that recognition. As always, we're a system guided by 3 critical questions. Why do we do this work? How do we accomplish that why? And then what are our outcomes? And it's meetings like this where we get feedback to help us stay aligned, to make sure that the outcomes that we're doing match the vision that we have. And to that end, Madam Chair, I'd like to take the liberty to clarify a situation with a book. And this situation is regarding a book, I Am Billie Jean King. I have been receiving several notices, as you have, about book banning and the removal of books. Got a letter that talked about alternative sexual lifestyles. I want to clarify something, if I may, that we as a district, just as London did in her poster, we accept everybody and celebrate everybody. It's about diversity. We don't take a position of judgment on any sexual lifestyle. All are welcome in our public schools, all are welcome in our district. One of the questions that was asked was, Dr. Ross, in the past, a committee would form and meet to talk about books. And I also want to make that clarification that on October the 7th, 2024 of this year, a new policy was adopted. That policy is IJL, Library Instructional Materials Selection and Adoption. And we do not form out of this policy those committees anymore that you would see that used to meet at the district office. The administration is given 3 criteria to look at. 1, age and developmental appropriateness, the educational suitability, and the 3rd, is it aligned to state instructional programs? Now, I wonder, as I go through this, I need to consider the FERPA rights of all students, but I think we should consider the genesis of this. And I want to start with the question of the children and how this came to me. It didn't start with an adult, it started with a question of a child. So what was the question of the children? The question was, what does this mean? That's the question posed to the school. When you ask, what is it, Dr. Ross? The specific thing that the children pointed to was romantic feelings. My question is, who answers that question for this child? The question was posed, what does this mean? The question to clarify is, what is it? The answer from the child is romantic feelings. So what does romantic feelings mean? Who answers this for the child? Now we go back to those 3 points. Is it the school? Does the school answer this question for the child? Is it educationally suitable, or is it instructionally aligned? We looked at the standards, we searched our text in romantic relationships, and this is whether it's male, female, or male, male, female, female, that's not the point. The question is, who discusses romantic feelings with the child? So by searching the standards, we could not find an alignment. We could not find it in our educational standards. So that leads us to age and developmentally appropriate. The book is written at a first grade 7-month level. It's recommended for ages 5 to age 9. To understand age and developmentally appropriate, you have to put yourself child developmentally, as we were taught, at that 5-year-old mind and at that 9-year-old mind. You can't use your current age, you must look at it at that level. The book talks about love and romantic relationships. Who answers the question? Does the teacher answer that question for the 5-year-old? Does the principal answer that question for the 6-year-old? Does the librarian answer it for the 7-year-old or the 8-year-old? Who answers the question? We felt that the best person to answer that question for that 5-year-old through 9-year-old was the parent. So the book was placed with a note in our Destiny system that if a child wanted the book, that the parent needed to be a part of it, because that was the question generated to us. Who answers this question? See, we don't talk about romantic relationships. We feel like a parent should talk about that. So you said, well, Dr. Ross, well, how does a parent know what books to get? Well, part of this policy requires us to put all our library books online so that they can be seen. Our libraries operate like the libraries that I went to school, with the one exception, is that most of our books are placed in, so the only thing you can see is the spine. These are not books a million. You don't just browse. You go in, and you used to go to a card catalog. You would research something, you pull out the card, not all the way, and write down where it was, and then you would go find it. Now that's computerized. It's on the Destiny system. At no time was this book removed from our Destiny system. We asked that a parent would be able, if this question arises again, be able to answer that question for that child. So it's available, it's still available, it's in our Destiny system, and it's available for the reading. Now, along with 16 other titles about Billie Jean King, or 15 other, there's a total of 16 titles that we have on the wonderful work and contributions of Billie Jean King. It just brings me back to that question, who answered this question for this particular child or these children? So when it comes to if it's age and developmentally appropriate to discuss romantic feelings, and that's what this is about. It's not about sexuality between this sex and that sex or that gender or that gender. Let's just say it's a male and a female. Who talks about those romantic feelings with this 5-year-old? Or this 8-year-old, or this 9-year-old? I felt it was the parent. So just wanted to clarify the statement. A lot has been thrown in about lifestyles, and put yourself in a kindergarten classroom, first grade, second grade, and third grade classroom, and ask yourself who answers the question. If that question arises, that teacher is not going to answer it. That principal is not going to answer it. We wanted the parent to be a part of it. And so that was the decision there. And so what we can answer is the question about love, because we talk about love all the time. That's our vision. We love and grow our students. Our mission is that we're focused on academic, social, emotional growth and development. And then we measure love. We actually identify what love is because we have it in our objective statement. We have it in our strategic plan. It is 6 strategies on school climate, 6 strategies on teacher administrative quality. Our growth is identified through our strategic plan with 6 strategies on student achievement and 6 strategies to stretch our students with gifted and talented strategies. And we measure that through our state assessments. Our students are working very hard. Our teachers are working very hard. It's assessment season now. We know that our state has a goal that by 2030, 75% of students will be at or above grade level. And so we're working very diligently to get there. But I want you to realize that as we look at our projections from fall to spring, there's a lot of growth that's happening in that red. There's a lot of opportunities that we don't see that materialize in terms of pass-fail, but there's growth to be celebrated of the students who did not meet. That growth extends all the way to high school. As we come up to graduation next week, we are working diligently to meet our 90% goal, where 9 out of 10 students who enter high schools in School District 5 will finish with a diploma and highly qualified by the 12th grade. Doing all of this is just really a focus on providing for the whole child. As we enter the budget season, we come back to our purpose. Our whole purpose for our annual budget is to establish not only a visit for the board and the budget, but to take care of the educational priorities of our district. I think there is becoming a clear debate on how do we balance the needs of the taxpayers with the needs of the children. And balancing that is becoming very difficult because we see an ever-growing, increasing need for the whole child within our schools. I believe and will always believe that a child won't learn reading and writing and arithmetic if those other items in the continuum of the whole child are not met. So as we move through the budget, I want to take a little time before we get into our budget reading tonight to just discuss some of the concerns I have as superintendent presenting this budget to the board. We talked about our revenue, the expenses we have, and then the reserve. Of course, a balanced budget would equal zero. But there's been changes that have taken place, and I think we need to really focus in on these changes. The first change happened in 2006 with the passage of Act 388. Prior to Act 388, you can look at our ACFR or CAFR as it was called at that time, 51% of our funding to take care of our expenses came from the state. That is now, and 49% came from local taxes. If you look at last year, 64 came from state, 35 came from local. Our district relies more on state funding than it did in the past. Look at when some of those teachers started to retire, they lived in a whole different financial revenue picture than we live in today. If you look at other districts, not all districts are the same. Charleston, the highest paying district, you can see its local to state share. Fort Mill, the only district that's outpacing us collectively in achievement. You can see its local to state outline. Lexington 1, who's closest to us in property value, you can see its state to local. And then Lexington 5. Well, for a district that relies more on state than local, it's important to see what's happening with the state funds. We're getting questions. Dr. Ross, reduce the state percentage, reduce the state pie, or the local pie, reduce the local pie and the local percentage. But we are seeing reductions in the state percentage. Why is that? We need to look at the Proviso 1.3 state aid to classrooms and see that there has been an increase in the weight of the students in charter schools versus those in traditional schools. So what does this mean? This means that in the old way of doing business, we would look at per pupil. We'll count up the number of students we have, and then we would have a per pupil allotment. That's no longer how it works. It does not work per pupil. We count up all our students, and we enter them into what's called WPUs, weighted pupil units. It's not the number of students that determines your money, it's the weight of the students that determine your money. And so, when you put the new formula into the new money, you'll find that 7% of the students in the state of South Carolina will get $50.7 million. of new money. And 93% of the students in the state of South Carolina will get $61.2 million of the new money. That will affect our local amount allocations. As a result, when you tally it up, you can see over the last 3 years how the state has put less and less new money into the education. And we used to have a 25-75 split. This year, with the House 1 bill, it's a 45-54 split, going from 75% of the new funds to 54% of the new funds. We must understand that we're going to receive less state funding than we have in the past, and less money is going into the state pot. Greenville did a graphic that I stole from them. It basically shows the weight of a student. A traditional student is weighted at the 1.0 weight. The same student, if they go to a brick and mortar charter school, is now weighted at a 2.25. The same student, if they go to a charter school virtual, is weighted at a 1.65. The student hasn't changed. Where they are changes their weight. Their weight determines the funds. Now, we shared this with our parent advisory and many in the community, and they called their legislators, got involved. We heard from our legislators, and they took action and created House 2. And House 2, which is different, which is in the blue lane, you can see that more weights were added back into the public school, or the traditional school pot from the virtual charter pot. So now the breakdown, instead of 75-25, it's 70-30. And so again, while it's more than the House 1 budget, it's still less than what we received as a share. There's something else that we need to consider, is that when we look at the difference between those, we're getting less and less funding as a district per student from the state. So these impacts will have an effect on our overarching budget. I must share this with you. Not all school districts will receive the same allotment, even from their weightings. Because of the proviso 1.3, the encouragement is that if your tax base is higher, that index will be applied to your WPUs, or the amount that you receive. Districts with higher tax bases will get less of the share of the global pot. So your numbers can increase, your weights can increase, but if your tax rate value increases, you will be backed out what's called the index of taxpaying ability, and that money will be withheld from you. And we were encouraged, and as was said, well, you can get that from local taxes. So as we're being pressed on both ends, pressed on the state end, pressed on the local end, to try to meet the whole child continuum. So because of that, we asked, what are the priorities? Because all of this with limited funds, you can't take care of. What are the priorities? The board met, the parent advisory, the faculty advisory, the student advisory, the principals and directors, all of them met to determine our priorities, and we determined that teacher pay raise was the #1 priority. And so we are presenting a budget that tries to meet those aims while we are being pressed on both sides, both state and local. At the end of the day, the reason that we fight so hard for these programs is what our parent advisory told us. Now, what's important are positive parent choices and experiences that are for my child. A variety of different outcomes that were wanted by the parents, but one united phrase is that it needs to fit my child. Moving to a more individual delivery system for education requires more, but we're in a world where both in state and local, we're being compressed in terms of resources to deliver. So with that, to not withhold the presentation, I'm going to take questions at the end and then move to our financial report for February. And welcome to the podium our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Heather Tucker, to deliver the February monthly financials. Ms. Tucker?
Hi. Good evening, Madam Chair, members.
I was going to do it at the end. I was going to do it at the end. Yeah, yeah.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. You have before you our February monthly financials. As far as February, and actually we wrapped up March today, but as far as February goes, our revenue is slightly higher than where we had been in the past at this point in the year. We were at 75%, and last year we were at 72%. This is to be expected. January and February are typically the highest months that we see for our revenue collection from local taxes. Tax bills go out in December. They come in typically January, February time period. That's when we see our highest collection months. And so our property taxes are typically the highest in those 2 months. We will see that to start to fall off. We saw that happen in March. And for Richland County, they had their reassessment this year. So Richland County's tax bills that went out in 2024 for tax year 2024 are the tax bills that we are collecting right now for Richland County. So we do expect to see a slightly higher collection from our revenue, especially for our property taxes in Richland County for the beginning of this year. Now, as far as expenditures, we are also seeing our expenditures slightly higher. We are seeing increase on a lot of things that we have typically paid for in the past. We are seeing increases due to inflation, tariffs. We are starting to see some of that with our expenditures. So our expenditures are slightly higher than they have been at this time in the previous years. We are at 58% of total expenditures through this point in the year, whereas last year we were at 54%. So even though it's a small percentage increase, we are seeing that on a daily basis with the cost of goods and services just being higher. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Tucker? Ms. Huddle?
If I'm reading this right, you were mentioning revenue, the property taxes, which are the bulk of the revenue, the budget 82,945, that's the total annual budget, right?
Correct.
And the actual is as of February, so we still have March, April, May, June, 4 months, right? And we've already collected 99.3% of the budget, right?
Correct.
Right.
And through March, we've actually collected 84 million. So we have collected slightly higher than that. And like I said, we would anticipate that, having the Richland County reassessment last year without any type of rollback. And we'll get into tax collections in a bit, but I would typically expect to see that after seeing the Richland County reassessment values that they shared with us in February of this year. Richland County values did go up, and so we would expect to see the Richland County property taxes higher for the first part of this year.
Based on prior trends, do you have any feel for where this may end up? I mean, if you were to guess.
We were actually looking at that the last couple of days. Richland County, for our collections for March, Richland County actually took back $7 million. They miscalculated something in our property taxes. So we will see this go down, even though I do think we are going to end the year higher than where our property taxes, what our budget was for our property taxes this past year. I would say conservatively, I would think we would end a couple of million higher. So the $85 million range is what I'm looking at as far as property taxes. Again, working with Richland and Lexington County for the reassessment, they keep telling me these are projections and projected values, but we have seen Richland County values increase, and we're expecting those values to be higher.
And one other question, and you may not know the answer, which is fine, but I was just curious, the revenue in lieu of taxes, the FILOT, I read something where there was a school district where I think the county was trying to take back that money. Are we in danger of that, or can you describe what this is, maybe to start with?
So fee in lieu of taxes is something that the county calculates for us. We have had a similar number for the last few years because this does play into our revenue projections. I actually reached out to both Richland and Lexington County to discuss this. The Richland County has not responded. Lexington County was going to look at it and get back to us as far as an answer. But because we are very conservative in our projections for those, I don't think we would see the situation that the other school district faced with a huge loss as far as our fee in lieu. I will say that our tax collections in general, we have seen a large increase in vehicle taxes. People were buying vehicles, so we are seeing those vehicles. Obviously, your vehicle taxes depreciate as your vehicles age, as they have mileage on them. So you typically pay higher taxes on those, whereas with your property taxes, those go up with reassessment. The other thing to consider is, and it didn't pass this year unless it makes it through conference, is the watercraft bill. We as a district receive a little over $2 million a year from our watercraft fees, or the watercraft taxes. And so about 1.2 million of that goes into operating and the other into debt service. So that is another potential revenue offset that we may see, something that definitely following and looking into for next year if that bill is to move forward. So that would be another offset of our revenue. But I do not, with the fee in lieu, I do not think that that's something that we would be in danger of losing. But I will definitely, like I said, I've reached out to the counties and I will follow back up with that. Questions?
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Tucker.
Thank you.
As Dr. Harris comes to the podium, our Chief of Student Services and Planning, I just wanted to give kind of an introduction to he and Mr. Scott on a very important program that we have in our school district, and it's a case for classroom supports. I've shown multiple times this graphic of an 8th grade classroom, English class, and the different achievement levels and reading levels that exist in this class. And how hard that teacher is working to get those students to actually be in those blue bars. You have to be at the green level, which is the 61st percentile. But you can see the number of students that this teacher has below the 21st percentile. That's that red area. And as a district, we felt that maybe if we continue the interventions that we're doing in school, but look at all of the time that a child is out of school, that they're in the community, we can look at that time and find a way to get great enrichment to help with not only academic achievement, but the social issues that tend to become barriers to those students academically. That's a great opportunity. We identified by an area, we looked at our reading scores. We put a red dot to the students in our lowest quartile of reading performance throughout our district. And what you could see is this area right here was a glowing orb of highly concentrated students in their residence. This is not where they attend school, this is where they live, in that blue time on that pie chart. That if we can put interventions in their community after school and weekends, holidays, when schools are closed, what difference could that make? Mr. Scott stepped up to the challenge with community support services. And we ran this map a year later after intervention. And that's what the map looks like. And that's just in a year. And I know there's a lot of factors, there's a lot of things going on, but it's showing an impact. What we are seeing is that these areas of dispersion. It's like of a greater need. So I wanted this opportunity, Dr. Harris wanted to bring just to show what's making this magic, what's helping us show impact through community support service. How are we getting these pathways? So at this time, I'll turn it over to our Chief of Student Services and Planning, Dr. Michael Harris.
Members of the board, Dr. Ross, community, thank you for that segue because it really does speak to the work, the worth, and the magnitude of work that has been done over the past year, actually 2, I think it is now, by Mr. Scott in community services. Again, we've identified an area, and I think his presentation tonight will give you a very clear indication of the magnitude of not just the impact, but really the difference that has been made in just a short period of time. And with these efforts, certainly look forward to expand that across the landscape of this district and other areas as well. So with that being said, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Julius Scott and talk about pathways to our possibilities.
Thank you, sir. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for having me today. And I have to say I'm really excited to share our progress, and I want to thank you up front. I like this saying that we are pursuing what's possible and not what is traditional. Creating the position I have today is all about what's possible. So Dr. Ross gave you some context for what we're doing today, and I just want to just share with you what's our purpose, what are we grounded in, and it's really 3 points. One, we really are committed to building community support system from birth to career. Gone are the days, as he said, where we simply support kids the time that they walk through our doors, but by the time they walk through our doors, depending on the community in which you're born, you're already behind the 8 ball. So we recognize the need to start before that. Our approach is place-based education. 2 years ago, Dr. Ross would not have been able to articulate that, but that is the essence of the work that I'm doing. Meeting with local businesses, government, nonprofits, service groups to say, how do we all rally together so it's not just School District 5, but that is embraced by our entire community. Then obviously our pilot site is Harbison Gardens, and we're using that as an opportunity to say, how do we change this? How do we measure this? And ultimately, how do we scale it? I believe the last time I was with you all, I shared that we were making a shift to not just be very generic and saying that we were providing wraparound services. That's what we do. But ultimately, everything goes back to outcomes. You have to be able to measure what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why. And so the last time we met, I shared with you all that we're focusing on 3 outcomes for now: kindergarten readiness, out-of-school time participation, and career pathway participation. We believe that if we're able to do this successfully, we can show that every student in every neighborhood in School District 5 will be able to flourish. So with that being said, our work in Harbison Gardens has really been pretty astounding and really impactful. And so from a kindergarten readiness standpoint, there are a lot of folks that I have the fortune of working with, and I won't suggest that I lead efforts because there was a lot of work put in place prior to my arrival. So with 4K and Ready by 5, parent educators, Richland County First Steps, all these folks have been working together to say, how do we invest in the Harbison Gardens community to ensure that kids who are not in our system as of yet have an opportunity to be exposed to literature and language and social emotional well-being skills. And so also with the Richland County Public Library, they come out once a week. I shared that previously. That's been a success. So the number of kids who are not in our school system, I have to reiterate this, who are getting access to books and being read to on a daily basis. We have families who are telling us we did not read to our children prior to these services being put in place. We will see the benefit of that as those children continue to come throughout our school. That work will continue. We're excited. We just met with the new executive officer director from the Richland County First Steps, and I anticipate that that partnership will continue to grow as we continue our work in Harbison Gardens. Beyond the bell, this is very critical. Out of school time. I've been fortunate over the last couple of years to get really involved in out of school time space on the state level as well as the national level. A major charge from my work was, Julius, we've got to get kids in some high quality programming, and we've been able to do so, not just in Harbison Gardens, but also have extended those opportunities for students at Seven Oaks Elementary. Have to give a lot of credit to Office of Instruction and ultimately thinking about our magnet school office. So we were able to get a grant a couple years ago that included opportunities for students to gain access to high quality programming. So this March, we have a partnership that's been developed with Barron's Academy, who has a number of programs across the state, but they are now in Seven Oaks Elementary. So for the first time in several years, we have students who had zero access to high quality programming that's now in programming. And those students will also participate in a 5-week program. So we're looking at ultimately about 50 students to participate. And you think, well, what's the big deal of that? One, it keeps kids safe. It helps working families because their children have a place to go and people that they trust and that they know. And then we're also collecting data because what we do know is that high-quality programming impacts school attendance, academic achievement, and discipline. And so by the end of this year, I will be able to give you some very hard stats on what that looks like at Seven Oaks Elementary. The other thing that we're really working on, and again, I'm going to say just pride, is strengthening our work as it relates to career-aligned collaboration. And so it's fitting that we're here at the Cates Center because we're working with Mr. Priggy and his development with the Hive program at Irmo Middle School, the after-school and summer programming. So we have an opportunity this summer for those students to be taught by CTE teachers within that 5-week program. So one of those courses over the course of this summer will be at a RC car racing mini camp. So students in this mini camp will be exposed to engineering, project design, they'll get a chance to compete with each other, and they also have an opportunity to earn certification. And the reason why this is important is long before they get to high school, they'll have an opportunity to be exposed to many, many high-earning careers. Just recently, a couple of weeks ago, I had an opportunity to visit Capitol Hill as a member of the After School Alliance Ambassador Program. So we had a chance to see the staffers from Senator Graham and Senator Scott's office to talk about the impact of summer learning. So it was in D.C., Capitol Hill, that I talked about the work at Irmo Middle School. They seem very intrigued and impressed by the work so far and have committed to saying they would like to help the state ultimately continue to maintain funding for after-school programs because they recognize the investment. Another piece that I want to add, because this is a recent development, so I think Dr. Ross may not be aware, I was just approached by the folks at Furman University, Riley Institute, but also Train Technologies. They are very interested in our work at Irmo Middle School and also would like to partner with us to say, how can we be a part of this after-school space where career pathway and career readiness is a part of that. So we have some meetings coming up in the next few weeks to talk with the Riley Institute folks, After School Alliance folks, and Train Technology individuals to say, how might we develop a pilot program that can serve as an example for the rest of the state. So super, super excited about that. And I believe the almost last piece that I'll share is thinking about career pathway participation. One of the things that we've been able to do is just look at some data to see how many of our students within the Irmo cluster, particularly in Harbison Gardens, were participating in career pathway opportunities and IGPs, individual graduation plans, just in case you may need to know what that is. In the state of South Carolina, beginning in 8th grade, all 8th graders have to participate in an IGP. That is the process where you sit down with the child and their parents, guidance counselors, to outline what are the opportunities that those children will have in high school. Well, in talking with the folks at Irmo Middle School, I learned by my surprise that not many of our families were participants in the IGP process and programming. That resonates with me. I have an 8th grader, and so we went through this process just recently. And so we said, how might we pursue a possibility and not just that which is traditional? So I have to give the folks at Irmo Middle credit. We said, what if we brought the IGP process to Harbison Gardens? And so the director of guidance came out. We met with families, and for the first time, many families learned about the IGP process, career courses that they could take. Then we took it to another level. We talked with Irmo High School, and they said, hey, we want to be involved in that process. So in January of this year, we had both Irmo and Irmo High, Irmo Middle, all converged in Harbison Gardens. And so we ended up meeting with about 15 families. And you might think, well, gosh, that doesn't seem like a large number, but that is 15 families who were not participating in this process at all. And their thought process was, man, this is really great. How do we learn more? And or my child really has an opportunity to do some things that we did not consider. And so now our goal is to make the IGP process in the community a mainstay. The other piece that we did this summer, or this past year as well, which I think is cool, looked at the number of kids who were in Harbison Gardens who actually attended CTE classes. We only had a handful. But our goal was to say, how can we connect those families with job shadowing experiences? And I have to give a shout out and credit to our folks at Spring Hill High and MEBA. And so they were able to help us get 3 of our kids from the gardens connected to some job shadow experiences. And I have to read this quote because it really speaks to our work. One of our parents said, "First of all, I just think it is fabulous because especially in the community that we live in, there are not always a lot of opportunities or just the knowledge of the opportunities. So it's definitely great that it's not just at the school, but actually bringing it to the neighborhood. We're shifting what's possible for our parents." And so this is a process that we're building and that we're growing upon. And almost the last thing I think I want to say is that our work is not just here in the community. If you follow what's happening in the state, we're moving more and more and more towards career pathway development, economic development. And so I'm happy to acknowledge that we are growing our champions of this work, 2 of which lead major statewide efforts, one of which is a graduate of School District 5. So Dr. Dana Yao is the executive director of the EOC, is a Harbison West graduate. And so we told her about the work that we're doing, and she said, "Julia Scott, tell me what you need. The EOC would love to support your efforts. How can we help?" And many things that we're doing from a cradle to career standpoint, if you look up what the EOC is all about, it supports that. And then most recently as well, if you're familiar with SC Competes and Transform SC, again, which is all about economic mobility and how do we ensure that our kids are getting exposed to career pathways. We have another former D5 member, Mrs. Bunny Ward. Many of you probably know. She's well known here in our community, but across the state. She's the director of SC Transform. Again, she too said, "Julius, I've been at this work for 20 years. You tell me what you need me to do." And I said, "We need you to become a champion of this work. Support us, join our efforts." And she said, "I will gladly do so." So our work is not just rooted here in Irmo. It's really connected to what our state efforts are looking like across South Carolina. So what's next for us? We'll continue to go through this notion of strategic planning, but really make an in-depth effort to ensure that those 3 outcomes can be measured, can be analyzed, and ensure that you all have a clear-cut idea that the work we're doing is just not talk. It's just not to give you a feel-good story, but we can show through evidence that this work is outside the box, but it is making a difference in the lives of our students. With that being said, are there any questions that I can answer for you?
Ms. Huddle?
Great presentation, thank you. I'm a little, I guess I'm a little confused. I want to try to understand like whose role is what.
Okay.
And where it fits. So I believe we issued an RFP or RFI, whatever, for an after-school program at Harbison West.
Yes, ma'am.
So is that in place or when will it be in place?
Yeah, so we have been working with Harbison West and the residents. We ultimately had an opportunity to partner with the YMCA. So they were granted the RFP, but we ran into a lot of legalities. And I will say one of the main issues is just transportation. So we were in lock and step with Attorney Mahoney to make sure that everything that we were doing was lining up. But the Y just had a lot of questions about their responsibilities and what might that look like. And ultimately, they were in a position where they really didn't want I won't say didn't want our money, but they just didn't think that for what they were going to have to take on, they really didn't want the risk. So we just had to start over. And so we are in the process of having a conversation with the on-site program there, because there is an on-site program at Harbison West, and making sure that our kids and those families can have access to that program, so that way we don't run into any issues with because that's a major issue of when you drop kids off, who's going to be responsible for picking them up? What happens if someone is not there to pick them up? Where does that responsibility lie? Ultimately, because we would be using district funds, grant funds, School District 5 would bear the weight of if something happens to a kid after drop-off, just a lot of legal questions. And so, unfortunately, we did not get a chance to start with the YMCA. And so we're having to back up just a bit and say, how do we just make sure what we're going to do with Harbison Gardens is directly at the school, so that way we don't worry about transportation. Kids can simply walk to and from, and it just helps to remove the legal barriers that we face by having them go someplace else.
So just to make sure I understand, so we're still trying, but we don't have an after-school program at Harbison West, the elementary school, but we through this other program, we are supporting a portion of those kids that attend Harbison Gardens, are from Harbison Gardens. Or
So
would
Harbison West Elementary has an on-site program that already exists.
Okay.
And so what we had done is we opened up the RFP for somebody outside of Harbison Gardens because they were already up to capacity. So at this point, to say that they can take any additional students from Harbison Gardens, they just couldn't do it from a space standpoint. So that's why we opened up the RFP, not realizing like the transportation piece. It's just a huge hurdle.
So the on-site program at Harbison West is only for children that live in Harbison Gardens?
No, ma'am. It is for the entire school. It's for
Okay.
the entire school.
All right, thank you.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
then the other question I had is, I'm a huge proponent of the birth to kindergarten. And one challenge I want to give you is, I read an article, and I think it's Oconee County Schools. They participate in the Dolly Parton reading participation. And I started putting our addresses and zip codes in and found out there's some, we don't as a rule. I know that the school district can recommend kids, and I believe it's Palmetto Project, but we don't have the blanket coverage like they do in some other parts of the state. And I don't know, I'm not saying that falls on the school district. Maybe it's something we could get the D5 Foundation to get involved in, but it sure would be nice if we could get the same kind of coverage for that some other places in South Carolina have.
So not only would it be nice, it is actually happening. So we actually have that grant. And so we have about 25 kids who are 4 years and under who are participants in the Dolly Parton Foundation. So that is going on as we speak.
I called Palmetto Project,
Yeah.
though, and they told me that we don't have a blanket. Like, we have to refer kids because there's not enough money. One thing I didn't realize is I thought it was free. It's not free.
Correct.
It's $30-something per student. So in order to get the blanket coverage, we have to come up with enough money to wide open. Because if you go into the website, if one of our parents goes into the website and puts their address in, it's going to come back and say you're not eligible.
Yeah, Ready by 5, Amanda Glowacki specifically is the person who's made that connection for us. And again, we have about 25 kids who live in Harbison Gardens who have been participating in that program now over the last year.
Okay, but is anybody looking at finding the money to make it available throughout our district?
I will do some research. I'm not certain of that, but absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And on the early childhood part, I realize you're involved in that. Is the district taking the lead on that, or is that First Steps? Who's kind of really in charge of until they get to 4K?
That's a great question. So obviously 4K, but that's where we're working with First Steps to say, how do we identify? Because traditionally, school systems have never taken that on. Like, we haven't taken on the role to say, how do we help kids before they get into our building? We're saying, like, we want to flip that on its head. Like, we can't wait until they get to us in 4K. We've got to start identifying kids as early as 2 and 3 years old. And so that's where our Ready by 5 group comes in really, really handy, because by being out in the community, they're able to assess students before they walk into our building. They're able to determine needs, and then they can get kids on our radar to determine who needs what services.
And we have a lot of that outlined in our D5 Youth and Family Services
Yes, sir.
program. Yeah.
Mr. Bainum?
Hey there. Thank you so much for promoting literacy with this program. Going forward, looking towards the future, do we have a document or an idea that shows like who all is involved staff-wise, and looking at like funding streams? You mentioned grants. We're trying to get more support from community sources. Obviously, with our revenue streams decreasing, we need to figure out ways to help promote literacy, outside of our school district. So is that kind of a focus, looking to grants and
Yes, sir.
community?
So that's really the power of where we're going with this whole notion of cradle to career. So there's an advisory group that we have that includes community members, so it's not just School District 5. But it is the goal of our advisory group to say, let's identify the resources that are needed, which may also include financial resources, because as has been said already, we see where the landscape is with a lot of funding. And so the group of our advisory is to say, what are the resources that are available? How do we measure it? And then how do we secure additional funds that would benefit School District 5?
And do we know like a total amount that we need to spend, like, 10 million, 20 million, I don't know, that we could, make a public, offering, hey, come join us to help promote literacy. We need this amount, and kind of do.
We don't know that just yet, but that's what we're working towards. Yes, sir, to identify what a number is.
Thank you.
Mr. Herring?
I know your specialty is mostly out-of-school time, but wondering about getting those kids to us earlier. There are some surrounding districts that have 3K programs. Is that something that we've looked into? Is it feasible?
Yeah, I think everything has to be on the table, to be quite honest with you. We can't leave any stone unturned. But if you can recall, this is our first year really identifying kindergarten readiness as an outcome. So we're still in the very early stages of this. But I can tell you that this will become even more concrete just because we now have our foot in the door and just have some really important partners and champions to say, what does this look like for us? Yeah.
Mr. Satterfield.
Yes. First of all, thank you for this is very proactive, and a lot of time in education we're reactive.
Right.
And I appreciate you getting all the other schools involved coming to these apartment complexes, because I can tell you I've worked at various schools across the district, and you go to one school on a parent night, you can't get a parking spot. You go to another school, if you got 5 parents there, you've had success. I know that too, that when Dr. Ross and I worked together at one time, we were looking at how to best identify the needs of kids, and you could go all the way back to 2nd grade, isn't that right, Dr. Ross? You could go all the way back to 2nd grade and you could see where the issues were. So if you're getting these kids, I mean, what do you got, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd? It's not much time, especially if you're making up time. So if you can gather these kids together earlier, then it really is literally a head start. So I really do like the proactive approach to this. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. I certainly appreciate the hard work and the movement there, and Dr. Harris, too, to your department. You know, we were talking about the 3rd grade. I was 3-year-olds. We're thinking about how many 4-year-old requests we still have coming in. We're still trying to meet all the 4-year-old, but you know, Dr. Harris's philosophy for his department is from prenatal all the way through adult ed, and those it's just how do we grasp the right net and scale. So again, thank you, Mr. Scott, for your work in that community. Madam Chair, members of the board, this concludes the superintendent's report, and I stand for questions.
Do you have any questions for Dr. Ross? Mr. Scully?
Yeah, Dr. Ross, thank you. Regarding one of the earlier points you brought up, I'm still weighing the issue of the book, and so I understand and appreciate your rationale and the explanation. I'm just torn on whether that's the proper solution. I guess, let me just clarify a couple of things. So, based on the rationale that, and I agree that it should be a parental discussion. And that's the solution and the ultimate answer. I just worry about the process of getting to that point. And when we, and I think in some issues the proper pathway is for parental consent on particular issues. For this particular book, though, I don't think it rises to that level with the issue being presented. I mean, romantic feelings, gosh, I remember being in preschool, kindergarten, and a girl got up for show and tell and announced to the class that she wanted to be my girlfriend. I peaked early. It's been downhill ever since. But the point is, I mean, romantic feelings they're just part of life at all ages. I had girlfriends all throughout elementary school, middle school, and it's just not something that we can shield ourselves from. I mean, the question of romance is always going to be around us, and it is in our homes and everywhere we go. And I think this is a rabbit hole potentially of, when we start making policy and the default position be on the negative when I think those are going to be the margins, the smaller numbers of issue. You know, the majority of the people aren't going to have that particular question or issue with the book or any kind of romantic issue there. So that's my concern. But I genuinely appreciate the thoughtfulness behind what you did. One question that I'd have for you is, if we did not have that restriction on that book, and then I'll come back to, please answer it and come back to me, what position, where would we stand from that? If you didn't make that decision, where would we be?
Very good. If we did not make that decision based on board policy, IJL, the next step would be for any person in the community, parent of that that had access to do a complainant form. And again, that would be considered by the state at that point.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Actually, the board would hear that. So
Okay.
the board would hear it. So if a parent made a complaint, then our local board would have the option of hearing it, or they could send it to the state.
That's right.
Okay.
Can we request to hear it?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Could we request to hear it? Not just in this instance, but, because this is a question that I've gotten too, if y'all made the decision to pull it, could the board make a request to supersede the decision and hear the complaint?
According to IJL, that would not be the case. The only way that the board would hear the case would be if the parent brought it based on KEC policy and used that form for the board to hear it. IJL does not give the board that ability to do so.
Okay.
I'm going to respectfully disagree in that the policy from the state specifically says that the board has ultimate authority. So if the policy from the state or the regulation says the board has ultimate authority, then I would think that the officers could put something on the agenda if they wanted to. That would be up to the officers, but I mean, that's what the state regulation says.
Yeah. Obviously, I've gotten a few phone calls about this and some inquiries. The problem is really on 1024, we passed two policies, KEC and IJL, and they almost read opposite. KEC says parents should fill out a form if they've got a complaint, and then you have a meeting and you get to hear public opinion about the book. And then the board selects a committee, and 3 of the board members have to be on the committee, and then the board makes a decision within 90 days. But it also mentions IJL in that policy. So there's a conflict there. It's a conflict. And I would also say that this is self-selected reading. This is not instructional materials. Most of IJL is based on instructional materials, not on self-selected reading. And I would guarantee you, I could guarantee this, if you go into any library, 50% of those books would not meet the requirements of materials, academic or educational rigor. If I got Nancy Drew's Mysteries or Jeannie B. Jones, which I read all of Jeannie B. Jones to my granddaughter, by the way, I mean, some of this stuff is just nonsense. Would the shelf space be better served by another book? Who determines that? Who determines educational rigor? You know, you go to the media center for self-selected. You're trying to encourage. We looked at our reading scores up there a while ago. We're trying to encourage kids to go in and select a book. And if a parent has an issue, then we follow the process. And the process is supposed to mirror what the State Board of Education has. You can appeal to that board, and they can go through that same process. But I don't think that we should, because of one parent, one individual determine what's best for everybody else. I'm okay with the appeal process. I mean, I am okay with the policy. As a matter of fact, I remember that we had a lot of discussion about KEC. We talked about what the parent has to do and go through the process. There wasn't a lot of talk about IJL, and maybe that's the board's fault. Maybe we were at error in that part. You know, obviously we approved it, so we should have done a better job of reading it or taking care of it. But there's definitely a conflict with IJL and KEC, and they were passed at the same time by this board. My preference would be not to allow one parent to dictate what happens to everybody else, and the other thing is let's follow the process. KEC is a board process. Let parents go through the process. And the book right now, where's the book being housed?
I think it's in the counselor's office.
So how many children go to the school counselor's office to check out a book?
Right.
I mean, do they have to go to the library and ask for that book?
Right, it's in our Destiny system, so they would still go to the library to get the book.
And I understand that, but a lot of times what kids do is they go to the media center and they start walking down the aisles and looking at books. I mean, but anyway, that's my thoughts and feelings. I think there's a conflict with KEC. I believe in the process. I believe parents should be able to challenge. I'm good with that. But we put in a process with KEC, and we talked about it at length, and that was my understanding of how it would be handled. And I read the little passage. I'm not sure if anybody else read the passage. There was nothing in that passage. It said, you know, some people have fallen in love with somebody of the same sex. There's no description of sex. There were no genitalia. There was no descriptions of anything. Anyway, I just think we should follow that process. I get bothered when boards, and at the state board, sometimes they don't follow their own process. But I think we should, if we approve of something, we should follow that process. And shame on us for approving IJL and KEC the same night. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Satterfield. Mrs. Scully?
Yeah, thank you. With that in mind, I'd like to make a motion that the board direct the superintendent to reverse the decision and lift the restriction placed on the book, the subject book.
Point of order, under FOIA laws, you can't take an action on an item that's not on the agenda and wasn't published at least 24 hours in advance. So you guys are the officers. You can put this on the agenda for our next meeting, but I don't believe you can take a vote tonight.
Can I ask a question? Ms. Hudd, I know you've been on the board forever. Can we ask that we revisit these policies and make them conducive so that they're separate? One is about instructional materials and the other is about media.
Yeah, but you can't take a vote, unfortunately.
I'm not asking to
right,
take a
yeah,
vote.
we can send an email to Mr. Herring like we always do and say we'd like to put it on the agenda. And I agree, I personally agree that we should revisit those policies.
Okay, then
Making a
withdraw
note.
the motion and request to place it on the upcoming agenda.
Okay. Got it. Do we have any other questions for Dr. Ross pertaining to the superintendent's report? All right, thank you.